There is a concept that is unfortunately not very well understood by the general public in the field of economics. Actually, there's a bunch of things about economics most people don't understand. The thing I'm thinking of is called opportunity cost. Everything that we acquire, whether it be a necessity or a luxury, has an opportunity cost of money or time or work. If you purchase an item for $100, that may or may not have been a good deal on that particular item. The opportunity cost is what else you could have done with $100. If you spent a day fixing your own car, well, you spent time that could have been used in some other activity. But presumably you saved money that would have cost you time to earn. It's kind of difficult to weigh that out sometimes. Well, everything has a cost. And in economics, it's important to consider what other uses these resources could have been put to. The best example that many of us have experienced is the home mortgage. The interest paid on a 30-year mortgage is a significant opportunity cost. That really adds up. That money would have been potentially very useful if you put it to other tasks. But we balance that extrinsic cost with the intrinsic value that we place upon owning our own home, and most of us would make that choice. Well, in our text today, two men will be considering the cost of redeeming the property of a man named Elimelech, a cost only one of them will in the end be willing to pay. And so let us begin our text, Ruth chapter 4. Let us start with the first 6 verses. It says, "Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat there. When the kinsman-redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, 'Come over here, my friend, and sit down.' So he went over and sat down. Boaz then took 10 of the elders of the town and said, 'Sit here,' and they did so. Then he said to the kinsman-redeemer, 'Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line.' 'I will redeem it,' he said. Then Boaz said," I think I'm going too far. Hold on, let me check my notes. I don't think I went it all the way to 6. Oh my goodness, how many pages till I get to the next part? I'm screwing this up. No. Oh, I did want to go that far. Holy cow, what am I thinking? Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, you acquire the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead man of the dead with his property." At this, the kinsman-redeemer said, "Then I cannot redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself, I cannot do it." So we begin with Boaz at the town gate, sitting, waiting for the nearer kinsman-redeemer to come along. We saw last week in Boaz's reaction to Ruth's proposal that he was unwilling to circumvent his kinsman who had the right to redeem before him. Because he was eager to know if this unnamed relative would or would not be taking his place as the kinsman-redeemer, Boaz waited at the customary place of legal transactions for them, and that is the city gate, for him to arrive. If our business is honest and honorable, we should have no worries about conducting it publicly, as did Boaz. Boaz wants this man to refuse to marry Ruth so he himself can do it. We know that's what his desire is, but he only wants to do that if he can do it with honor. So Boaz takes 10 elders and says, "Sit here." In addition to himself and his relative, Boaz gathers 10 respectable witnesses to be impartial observers of his impending conversation. In the future, nobody will be able to claim that Boaz did anything less than what is proper, as he will have trustworthy witnesses to it. So he says to the kinsman-redeemer, Naomi, who's come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to Elimelech. Boaz begins the conversation by speaking about a great business opportunity, the purchase of the land of Elimelech, whose sons had both died childless, by Elimelech's widow, Naomi. In Israel, it was against the law of Moses to permanently sell the land that had been divided up in the days of Joshua to each tribe, and from there to each clan, and finally each family. To acquire more land would thus be well nigh impossible without resorting to underhanded means. This, however, this situation is a bit of an exception. Without an heir to inherit, somebody has to take over the land of Elimelech by giving the widow some money. Whatever price she's asking for it, it would seem like an opportunity not to be missed, because such opportunities normally don't occur. The misfortune of Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion, who all died, could thus benefit this man's family for generations to come by increasing the size of his estate. Normally, the land would revert to Elimelech's family during the year of Jubilee every 50 years. Even if it was mortgaged out, it would go back. But if Naomi dies without an heir, which seems likely given her age, nobody will be around to reclaim that piece of land. It will permanently belong to the one who redeems it. So Boaz says, I thought I should bring this matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these witnesses. Boaz is acting here like a man who finds a wallet chock full of cash, but with no ID in it. And so he, of course, takes it to the police station and reports a wallet full of cash, just in case somebody says they lost it. Not everybody would do that. This relative of Boaz, perhaps his older brother or maybe one of his cousins, has just been given a golden opportunity. It has fallen right into his lap. Given the circumstances as he presently understands them, only a great fool would not jump at the chance. To add to it, Boaz said, if you're going to do it, go ahead, but if not, tell me, because I'm next in line and I really want to. Boaz makes it clear that he will take the offer if his relative turns it down, something that should go without saying, given the bargain that it appears to be. At this moment, the opportunity cost of doing the right thing is exceedingly low. It's even beneficial. When the right thing pays off, who doesn't want to choose it? That's just a great bonus. So he says, I will redeem it. It seems if we've spent a lot of time here in the book of Ruth learning about Boaz for nothing, because his plan to marry Ruth has just been thwarted. He was too honest for his own good, it seems. The pessimists were right all along. What a bummer this story has turned out to be. But wait a minute. Doesn't the Levitical law require that the land be redeemed on behalf of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon, if at all possible? Is there really no way to continue that line and keep it from ending? Well, yeah, there is, Boaz reminds him. Then Boaz says, on the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth, you acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. And here is the true cost of buying Naomi's land. You're not buying it for yourself, but for the as of yet unborn son of Ruth the Moabitess, who will be officially designated as Naomi's grandson, the heir of Elimelech's property. So anyone who purchases the land is really only leasing it until this future heir comes of age, and will also be obligated in the interim to care for Naomi, for Ruth, and for Ruth's future children. Instead of a windfall of financial benefit, this deal is actually an ongoing obligation that will carry a significant expense for years to come. Redemption is suddenly not a bargain at all, but a costly sacrifice. In fact, it is, in this case, an act of mercy, an act of love, an act of grace. And so it is, of course, with our kinsman-redeemer, Jesus Christ. Jesus became a man in part so that he had the standing of our kinsman, our fellow human being, to be able to step forward as our Redeemer. The cost for him, you well know. We remember it each time we take communion and speak of the broken body of Christ, of his blood poured out. And we remember it each Good Friday as we commemorate his passion with a crosswalk and a candlelight service. It cost Jesus everything. a perfect life unjustly condemned but willingly offered, a sacrifice to pay for sins he did not commit, but we did, and a righteousness we could not earn, but he could impart to us. The Lamb of God for lost sinners, slain, our kinsman-redeemer. The cost was incredibly high, so high that at the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus asked the Father to take the cup away, even knowing that he could not, knowing that he must drink it all down to the bitter dregs, knowing that soon he would cry out to the Father, who would turn away from the sin that he was bearing. Jesus knew he would say, my God, why have you forsaken me? But he also knew that those words would be followed by the triumph of his final words, it is finished. When he released his spirit, entering the grave, though death could not hold him, and 3 days later he would rise in triumph and glory, having overcome both sin and death, and redeeming for God the lost who put their faith in him, the lost in numbers beyond counting, to the glory of God. The cost of redemption was high, but as we know, Jesus paid it all, because he is our kinsman-redeemer. Back to the story of Ruth and Boaz. It says, at this, the kinsman-redeemer said, then I can't redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it, I can't do it. When the deal was a piece of land that could increase his estate, he was perfectly willing to help his relative's widow. Now that Boaz has explained that the land would not remain his, and it brings with it the care of 2 widows and potential children, the enthusiasm has melted away to be replaced by pragmatic concerns. Reminds me of the parable of the sower. He's like the rocky soil. He received this news with enthusiasm at first, but when the cost was made clear to him, not so much. It didn't stick. Pragmatism is an important thing, but pragmatism can be the enemy of righteousness. It would have been difficult for this man to balance his own family's need with that of Ruth and Naomi. It would have cost him. For him, however, that's not a price he's willing to pay. To do that which is right can be very costly. It can be difficult. We ought to be honest with ourselves. If we don't think we have, if we don't think we can do what we believe we must do, we need to find help from other people, lest we fail in our attempt to do it alone. Remember that we are the people called to do God's will, not the persons called to do the will of God. The story continues in verses 7 through 10. Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the kinsman-redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from the town records. Today you are witnesses. So Boaz announces to the witnesses that he is buying all of the property of Naomi. After having performed a fairly odd cultural ritual to ratify the passing of the responsibility from the nearest kinsman to Boaz, Boaz announces to the elders of the town of Bethlehem that he will purchase the land of Elimelech. That whole sandal exchange thing was actually even archaic by the time the story of Ruth was written down. Presumably only a few generations later, nobody was doing that weird thing anymore. And so the author had to explain it in verse 7. Oh, by the way, that's why he's giving him a sandal. Boaz announces, I've also acquired Ruth the Moabitess and Mahlon's widow as my wife, that I might maintain the name of the dead, so it will not disappear. Boaz also publicly declares his intention to marry Ruth, citing the continuation of the family name as one of his goals in doing so. We also know that Boaz respects Ruth's noble character, and I would imagine he is well on his way to loving her if he doesn't already. But the legal and cultural motivation is what he needs to state publicly. By doing so, Boaz is helping to reinforce that cultural morality in the law of Moses by letting everyone see that an important and respected man like him is willing to follow the law. We all know that the rich and powerful can usually ignore the law if they want to, with little danger of there being any real consequences that stick to them. But Boaz is not like that. He is eager to fulfill his duty and obey the law as a kinsman-redeemer. And now we begin to see the results of their actions. It says, "Then the elders and all those at the gate said, 'We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah.'" The elders offer up the blessing. They begin by saying, "May the Lord make the woman who's coming to your home like Rachel and Leah, who built up the house of Israel." So the elders are offering on Boaz's behalf a blessing, and it has some interesting elements in it. The first of which is the marriage of Jacob to the sisters Rachel and Leah, which resulted from the plotting of their father Laban, who wanted to marry off the older and less attractive Leah first, even though Jacob was in love with Rachel. The story of Jacob's interaction, if you want to check it out, begins in Genesis chapter 29. And while it is an odd story and an odd turn of events, it did result in 12 sons, the 12 sons of Israel. Among them, Boaz's ancestor Judah, as well as such famous ones as Joseph and Benjamin and Levi, and all the rest of the brothers who would become the 12 tribes. The blessing, then, that they are speaking is designed to signify the bounty of many sons. They're wishing many sons for Boaz and Ruth. Say, may you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Ephrathah is the ancient name of the city of Bethlehem, actually. So that is a bit redundant. But it brings to mind from Genesis the tomb of Rachel, which is actually here in Bethlehem, where Jacob placed her after she died. Rachel died giving birth to her second son, Benjamin, who was the last of the 12 sons of Jacob. And lastly, they say, "Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah," or Tamar. Perez is actually Boaz's ancestor, 6 generations removed. His mother was Tamar, one of 3 women along with Boaz's mother Rahab and Ruth, who are mentioned in Matthew's genealogy of Jesus. The story of Judah and Tamar is in Genesis 38. It is a tragic tale of foolish choices by Judah, who neglected, interestingly, he neglected to follow the Levirate marriage custom, the very custom that Boaz is now fulfilling. He is the opposite of Boaz. In the end, God blessed Tamar, despite the wrong done to her by Judah initially. Blessed her with twin sons, and included her along with Rahab and Ruth, both foreign women who would have been looked down upon by pious Jews. He included all 3 of these women in the genealogy of the Messiah. The contrast between the failure of Boaz's ancestor Judah and Boaz's own stalwart character is very stark. If God was willing to bless Tamar despite Judah's failure, what might he do for Boaz and Ruth, both of whom have displayed repeatedly the high quality of their character? Well, here we see in verse 13 the vindication of Ruth. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Ruth is vindicated culturally by giving birth to a son, a boy who will be the heir to Elimelech's line, an outcome that Naomi had previously, not that long ago, despaired of. The loyalty, love, and hard work of Ruth has been rewarded. The woman who continued to be called the Moabitess throughout the story has now been shown the kindness of the Lord. She is no longer a foreigner, but a member of the people of God. She was not born in Israel, but she has joined Israel. A beautiful illustration of the grace of God, even to Ruth the Moabitess. The story, however, is about to shift for its climax. From here on out, we're not talking about Ruth. We're going to be talking about Naomi. Verses 14 through 17. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman-redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So Naomi takes the child, places him in her lap, and cares for him. The women say, "You have a son." The women of Naomi's hometown, these are her friends and relatives, offer up praise to God for providing for her Ruth and Boaz, both of whom have been instrumental in turning her life around. Remember, it was not that long ago that Naomi returned from Boaz, broken and bitter, eschewing her name and asking to be called Mara instead. God, who abounds in kindness, love, and mercy, chose to bless Naomi in spite of her loss of faith. The faithfulness of Boaz and Ruth were the conduits that God used to bless Naomi. But it was the providence that sent Ruth to Boaz's field in the first place, and the power of God that enabled Ruth to conceive her son. Naomi gave up on God, but God didn't give up on Naomi. What a powerful illustration for us of the grace of God. You see, we may get knocked down. We may falter. We may even lose hope. But God can raise us up again. God can redeem our lives, just as he has redeemed our souls. The boy was placed on Naomi's lap, symbolically to indicate that he will carry on Elimelech's family name, not that of Boaz's father, in fulfillment of the law of Moses. In reality, Naomi is this child's grandmother, even though she's not blood related. Boaz and Ruth will be his parents in every way that matters. But the symbolism is very important. The symbolism of calling this the grandchild of Naomi is important. It's important to the rehabilitation of Naomi's heart and mind. It was for her the final proof that God never abandoned her. Even at her lowest, God was still there to pull her back up. They named the child Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And this story, the story of Ruth, Boaz, and Naomi, would be powerful even if we had never heard of any of Ruth's descendants. Even if they listed a bunch of them and we had no idea who any of them were, it would still be a powerful story. But as it is, Ruth was the great-grandmother of the most renowned king of Israel, David, the man after God's own heart, which would make Naomi, not biologically, but symbolically, his great-great-grandmother. And so in the end, we see the plan of God realized. It says, "This then is the family line of Perez. Perez, the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Aminadab. Aminadab, the father of Nashon. Nashon, the father of Salmon. Salmon, the father of Boaz. Boaz, the father of Obed. Obed, the father of Jesse. And Jesse, the father of David." The providential plan of God to elevate David to the throne of Israel and eventually to bring out of that line of David the Messiah himself was the work of generations. God at work for generations. God accomplished what he set out to do, to have a leader for his people Israel, an ancestor for an ancestor for the one who would one day save them from their sins. Despite the mistakes of people like Judah, despite the early death of Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion, and despite the prejudice that could have been aimed at Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth, God accomplished what he set out to do. What God has promised, he will do. We can either be those who advance the will of God like Boaz and Ruth, or those who stand in its way. But as the prayer that Jesus taught us says, his plan will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So may we, as the people of God, know his will for us. May we seek to accomplish it. And may we, by his power and grace, advance the cause of the gospel of Jesus Christ.